That morning, Jeanette woke up with a strange pain low in her back. It wasn't the kind of pain she could ignore. It came in waves, making her hold her breath and grab the side of the bed for support. She sat there for a while, trying to understand what was happening. Her body felt weak, her back ached, sweat had already started to form on her forehead. She looked around the small room she shared with her husband, Richard. He was lying down quietly on the bed, still sick and looking pale. Janet didn't want to wake him. He'd been battling illness for months and barely had the strength to move around. She didn't even have the heart to tell him how bad her pain was. So, she decided to go to the hospital alone. She got dressed slowly and left the house, holding her belly as she walked. The sun was already up and the road to the hospital felt longer than usual. She had to stop a few times to catch her breath, but she kept moving. When she finally got to the hospital, she went straight to the reception desk. "Please," she said, her voice shaking a little. I'm in pain. I think it's time." The nurse looked up and asked for a hospital card. Janet handed it over. The nurse typed something on the computer and said, "You will need to make a deposit of $20 before we admit you." Janet blinked. $20? She repeated quietly. "Yes, ma'am. That's the hospital policy." Janet's voice broke. "Please, I don't have that right now. I just need help. I'm in serious pain. I can pay later." But the nurse shook her head. "I am sorry. We can't go against the policy. You have to make a deposit before you can be admitted." Janet begged. She pleaded. Her voice grew weaker with each sentence, but the answer didn't change. The nurse suggested she make part of the payment, maybe half, maybe even a quarter. But Janet didn't have a single dollar on her. After a while, another staff member came over and quietly told her that if she couldn't pay, she would have to leave the reception area. Security was called and the guard gently led her outside. She stood there outside the hospital gate in pain and humiliation. Tears filled her eyes. She tried to explain one more time, but they wouldn't listen. People passing by just looked at her briefly and kept moving. No one stopped. Eventually, she gave up and slowly began the long walk home. Every step hurt. She was tired, scared, and completely helpless. When she got home, she sat on the edge of the bed, trying to think of who she could call for help. She went through the names on her phone, family, friends, neighbors, but everyone she reached out to either didn't pick up or said they didn't have money to spare. She sat there in silence for a long time, holding her belly and praying the pain would stop, but it didn't. It only got worse. A few hours later, as the evening approached, Janet couldn't take it anymore. The pain had become unbearable. Her breathing grew faster. Her legs felt weak. She looked around the room and said quietly to herself, "If I die today, let it be at that hospital gate. I can't stay here and die alone." She picked up her scarf and slowly made her way out again. The street was quieter now. She walked with one hand pressed against her stomach, determined to at least make it to the hospital. By the time she reached the hospital gate again, she was completely exhausted. Her legs were trembling. She took a few more steps inside, trying to steady herself, and then suddenly, everything went blurry. Her body gave up. She fell to the ground near the entrance. A few seconds later, a man who had been walking nearby saw her fall. His name was John. He had just parked his car across the street, waiting for his wife to finish some quick shopping when he saw a pregnant woman collapse at the hospital gate. For a second, he froze. He thought maybe there were nurses nearby. Maybe someone else would rush to her first. But when no one moved, he dropped everything and ran. By the time he reached her, she could barely talk. Her breathing was shallow. Sweat covered her face. He knelt beside her and said softly, "Please, hang in there. You'll be fine. I'm going to help you, okay?" Janet nodded weakly, tears slipping down her cheeks. John shouted towards the hospital, "Please, somebody help! This woman needs help right now." A nurse came out reluctantly. One of the same faces that had turned Janet away earlier. She looked startled to see her back there, this time barely conscious on the ground. What happened to her? The nurse asked, trying to sound professional. John was already helping Janet sit up. She said, "She's been here before, and you refused to admit her because she couldn't pay. Is that true?" The nurse looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we have policies." "Policies?" John cut in, raising his voice slightly. "She's about to give birth and you're talking about policies. She could die right now." The nurse hesitated, glanced towards the security guard, and finally said, "All right, bring her in." John helped Janet up and followed as they took her inside. Nurses began rushing around, preparing a stretcher. The doctor on duty joined them, asking quick questions, checking her pulse, giving orders. As they wheeled her towards the labor room, the receptionist quietly approached John. "Sir, we will need a deposit before we proceed," she said carefully. John turned to her. "How much?" $20, she said. He looked stunned for a moment. $20? That's it? "Yes, sir. Just $20 to register her." He didn't even hesitate. He pulled out his wallet, handed her some cash and said, "Do whatever you need to do. Just save her and the baby." She nodded and ran off to process the payment. A few minutes later, they confirmed Janet was in active labor. John stayed outside the delivery ward, pacing the hallway anxiously. He wasn't a relative, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Something about her face, tired, desperate, and yet still fighting, stayed with him. He called his wife immediately. "Babe, please, I need your help," he said. "What's wrong?" she asked. "There is a woman here, pregnant and in serious pain. She didn't have any money for admission. I have paid her bills, but they said she doesn't have any baby clothes or any of the delivery items. Can you rush and get them? Just the basics for a newborn." His wife didn't even ask questions. "Okay," she said. "I'm on my way." Hours passed. John stayed on that corridor, watching nurses rush in and out. The faint sound of someone groaning from inside. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. Then finally, the doctor came out. John stood up immediately. "Doctor, how is she? Is she okay?" The doctor looked tired, his voice gentle. "She made it. But..." He paused. "The baby didn't survive." John froze. "What?" The doctor sighed. "The baby was already gone before we started. We tried, but it was too late." John felt his chest tightened. He rubbed his hand over his face, trying to hold it together. He didn't even know this woman personally, but the news hit him so hard. He glanced through the glass at Janet's room. She was lying still, her face pale, tears running silently down her cheeks. The doctor added softly, "If she had come earlier, maybe there was a chance, but she's been in pain for too long. Her body was too weak." John nodded slowly, unable to speak. His wife arrived about 10 minutes later with bags of baby clothes, diapers and supplies, everything she could find in a rush. When John told her what had happened, she covered her mouth in shock. "Oh no, poor woman," she whispered. They both stood there quietly for a while, watching through the glass. Janet was awake now, staring blankly at the ceiling, her hands resting on her stomach where her baby should have been. The nurse came out with a tired face. "She keeps asking to see her baby," she said quietly. John's wife broke down. She couldn't stop the tears. John reached out and held her hand tightly. He felt something shift inside him that day. A kind of sadness mixed with anger, not at anyone in particular, but at how easily life could turn cruel for people who had nothing. He paid all the hospital bills, including the ones for her medication and recovery. Before leaving, he spoke to the nurse in charge. "Please, take care of her until she's discharged. I will handle everything." She nodded gratefully. "You are a good man, sir." John didn't feel like one. He felt helpless. He wished he could have found her sooner. When he got home that night, he couldn't sleep. The image of Janet lying on that hospital bed wouldn't leave his mind. He sat on the edge of his bed, opened his phone, and typed a post on his Twitter. He wrote about what he had witnessed, not to show off, but because he needed to let it out. He wrote, "I met a pregnant woman today. who was rejected at the hospital because she couldn't pay $20. By the time she finally got help, her baby was already gone. I can't stop thinking about it. We really need to be kinder to people. $20 shouldn't be the reason a child doesn't get to live. He hit post and put the phone aside. He didn't expect what happened next. The next morning, John woke up to dozens of notifications lighting up his phone. At first, he thought it was a system glitch. Then, he opened Twitter and froze. His post had gone viral overnight. Thousands of people were retweeting it, commenting, sharing their outrage, their sadness, and their prayers. Some wrote, "This is heartbreaking." Others said, "Where is she? I want to help." By noon, local blogs had picked up the story. By evening, it had spread to Facebook, Instagram, and even online news platforms. Everyone was talking about the pregnant woman rejected over $20. John's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists reached out. NGOs sent him DMs. People offered donations, some small, some shockingly large. The story had touched a nerve. But for John, this wasn't about numbers. It was about Janet. He drove back to the hospital that afternoon. Janet was sitting up now, weak but conscious. Her face looked different, not just from the pain, but from everything she'd been through. When she saw John walking, she tried to sit up straight. He smiled softly. "Hey, you're awake." She managed a faint smile. "You came back." "Of course I did," he said. "How are you feeling, ma'am?" She hesitated, her voice breaking. "Empty." John sat down beside her. "I know, I'm really sorry." Tears rolled down her cheeks silently. She kept her eyes on the wall. "They wouldn't even listen to me. I begged them. I begged." John didn't interrupt. He let her talk. Sometimes, silence was the only thing that could hold someone's pain. Janet broke down completely, her shoulders trembling as she tried to speak through her tears. "Maybe if they had taken me in the first time I came, maybe my baby would have still been alive. I begged them till I couldn't talk anymore. They just sent me out." John left a lump rise in his throat. He reached for her hand, his own eyes wet. "Hey, ma'am, don't do that to yourself, okay? You did everything you could. What happened wasn't your fault." She shook her head slowly, tears streaming. "I keep replaying it in my head. If only they had helped. Even a little." John squeezed her hand gently. "I know, ma'am, but you're here now. You're alive. And that means there's still a chance for something good to come out of all this. You can't see it now, but you will." For a long moment, she said nothing. She just breathed through the silence, tears still wet on her cheeks. Then she nodded faintly. "You're very right, sir. In all of this, I still thank God that I am alive. Because if you hadn't come when you did, maybe I wouldn't have made it either." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Thank you, sir. From my heart, I say a very big thank you. May God bless you and send you help in every areas of your needs." When she finally wiped her eyes, he told her about the post, how it had gone viral, how people all over the world were asking to help her. Janet stared at him in disbelief. "Help? For me?" He nodded. "Yes, for you. You've been through too much and people want to make things right." She looked down at her hands, shaking her head slowly. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "Just heal." After she was discharged, John helped her back home. She was still weak, moving slowly, but at least she was alive. He sat with her in that small room for a while before leaving. In the days that followed, messages poured in. Some wanted to donate money, others sent groceries and clothes. John created a GoFundMe page on her behalf titled, "Help Janet Rebuild Her Life." Within 3 days, it raised over $10,000. Janet couldn't believe it when John showed her the page. "All this for me?" He smiled. People are better than we think. Sometimes, they just need to see where their kindness is needed. For the first time since losing her baby, Janet smiled fully. It was a tired smile, but it was real. And when he sent her the money, her eyes widened. People had been donating, he said gently. They said they were touched by your story. And when she saw the transfer notification, tears rolled down her face. It wasn't just the money. It was the thought that strangers cared enough to help. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. John later told her that many people online had been asking to hear directly from her. They said they would like to hear your side. He explained, "Would you be okay going live with me? You don't have to if you're not ready." She hesitated at first. She wasn't used to talking to cameras or strangers, but after thinking about it, she agreed. "Let them hear," she said quietly. "Let them hear what really happened." That evening, John set up his phone in a small house and went live. Within minutes, hundreds of people joined, and before long, the views crossed to thousands. She sat on a low stool, dressed in a plain wrapper and scarf. Her voice shook as she started to speak. "Hi, my name is Janet," she said softly. "First, I want to thank everyone who helped me. I can't even believe people I don't know could care this much. Thank you so much." She tried to hold back tears, but her voice broke. "That day, when I was in pain, I begged them at the hospital. I told them I was dying. I told them I couldn't breathe, but they said I should pay first, $20. That was all." She paused, covering her face with both hands as her shoulders trembled. The live chat exploded with messages. People typing, "It's okay, we love you. We are sorry you went through this." John handed her some tissue and whispered something to calm her. She nodded, took a deep breath, and continued. "Maybe if they had taken me in that first time, maybe my baby would have lived," she said. "But I give thanks to God still. At least I am alive. I believe everything happened for a reason." She wiped her face again, then looked at John. "Sir, if you hadn't come that day, maybe I wouldn't even be here. You helped me when no one else did. May God Almighty bless you." John, visibly moved, only nodded. Then she went on to share what life had been like before everything fell apart. She said her husband, Richard, had lost his job 2 months after she conceived. "He tried everything," she said. "He kept saying, 'I don't want our baby to suffer.' He was a hard-working man, but every door just seemed closed." She explained that Richard, being business-minded, decided to start an online venture. He bought an importation and e-commerce course, learning how to import goods from China and resell locally. At least they had hope. "He used all his savings," she said quietly. "Then he borrowed from friends and family, hoping to make profits. But the man he dealt with in China scammed him. He sent inferior goods, useless things that nobody could buy." The moment she said that, she broke down again. "He cried like a baby," she continued. "That day, I saw my husband lose his strength. He just sat there staring at the boxes like his whole world had ended." They were evicted soon after because they couldn't renew rent. "We moved into this small place," she said, gesturing around the shabby room visible behind her on camera. "That's how his health started failing. He became weak and sick. He couldn't even be there when I was in labor." At this point, many viewers watching the live stream were crying. Some sent long messages of comfort. Others asked for John's account details to send help immediately. The live comment section was overflowing with love and compassion. One comment read, "I've been a nurse for 15 years. This broke me. No one should die because they are poor." Another said, "I watched this with my daughter. We both cried, sending love from Canada." Then, as more people joined the live, viewers began to notice the state of the house behind her, the peeling paint, the worn-out curtain serving as a door, and the low ceiling patched with cardboard. Someone commented, "Can we help her get a better place?" Moments later, another viewer typed, "If she finds a new apartment, I'll pay the rent for 3 years." John looked stunned. "You mean you will take care of her rent for 3 years?" He repeated, reading the comments aloud. "Yes," the donor replied, "she deserves peace." Another person said, to maintain that rent, she will need something to do. I will send her money to start a small business. Before long, the comment section turned into a wave of kindness. People sent clothes, shoes, groceries, everything she could need. The love was overwhelming. Within a week, John helped her secure a new apartment, neat, bright, with proper windows and tiled floors. When she saw it, she stood at the door for a long time, unable to move. Her hands covered her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Then she dropped to her knees and began to pray. God, thank you, she said, crying openly. I didn't know you were still mindful of me. Thank you for everyone you used to change my story. I thank you for sending John to me. John recorded the moment quietly. The video went viral again. Thousands watched as this once hopeless woman found restoration. A month later, she called John and asked him to visit. There is something I want to show you, sir, she said over the phone. When John arrived, he led him down a street filled with shops. They stopped in front of a big, colorful kiddie store. Inside were rows of baby clothes, shoes, toys, and all the children's essentials neatly arranged. John turned to her, confused. Wait, what's going on here, ma'am? She smiled, tears already gathering in her eyes. Mr. John, she said softly, this is our new business. I used part of the money people sent to me to open this shop. He was speechless. You did this? Yes, she said proudly. I wanted to build something lasting. I chose to sell children's items because it reminds me of my baby and the love I received from everyone. Every time I see these clothes, I remember her. But now, the pain reminds me of hope. What I lost brought me a new beginning. John could only nod, smiling through emotion. You are strong, he said, and your story will inspire many. The video that day also went viral. People flooded the comment section again, celebrating her resilience. Many praised her for not wasting the opportunity she'd been given. Months passed, her business grew. The shop expanded and her husband's health improved. They were finally stable, eating well, paying bills, and living peacefully. But she didn't stop there. She created a small personal tradition. Every month, she would package small gifts, baby clothes, diapers, feeding bottles, and visit nearby hospitals to bless new mothers who couldn't afford such things. To me, she once said in another live video, this is my own way of saying thank you to God and thank you to everyone who helped me when I had nothing. I can't repay them, but I can pass it on. About 2 years later, something beautiful happened. Janet discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was healthy, stronger, and surrounded by people who cared. When she told John and Grace, they cried with her. You deserve this joy, Grace said, hugging her tightly. John smiled and said, this time, no one is asking you for $20. They all laughed through their tears. 9 months later, on a calm Sunday morning, Janet gave birth to a healthy baby girl. When John and Grace came to visit at the hospital, she handed the baby to them with trembling hands. Her name is Hope, she said softly. John swallowed hard. Hope? She nodded. Because that's what you gave me. He looked at the tiny sleeping face and smiled through the blur of emotion. She's perfect. As he stood there, watching Janet cradle her baby, he realized something profound. The world could be cruel, yes, but it could also be astonishingly beautiful when one person chose compassion over indifference. A few days later, John shared an update on Twitter again. A photo of Janet holding baby Hope. His caption simply read, remember the woman who was turned away from the hospital because she couldn't pay $20? Meet her daughter, Hope. She made it. Within hours, the photo spread everywhere. It became one of those rare moments the internet actually united in pure joy. People commented things like, crying, humanity still exists. This made my day. Bless you, John. Hope, what a perfect name. Even the hospital that had once turned her away issued a public statement promising to review their emergency policies. Today, that woman's story is still being shared as one of faith, resilience, and gratitude. Her journey taught many that miracles don't always come through angels or pastors. Sometimes, they come through ordinary people who simply decide to care. And that's how a woman once rejected over $20 found her life completely transformed through the power of kindness and a God who never forgets his own. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please give it a like, comment, and share with your friends and loved ones. Thanks for always watching. I'll see you in the next. Goodbye.